Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this week are Richard Allen and Mohammed Ali. Liga did not disappoint this weekend with a number of interesting clashes bringing up different results, and with that Champions League music just faintly playing in the background, it's almost time for the real season to start. But more on all that and more, including your questions, after the latest headlines. Lille and Bordeaux kicked us off on Friday evening with a relatively dull affair, even with Nicolas de Préville's return to the Stade Pierre-Mauroy, playing out a scoreless draw in which Thiago Maia was sent off in the first half. Paris Saint-Germain won 5-1 with a debut strike from Kylian Mbappe, but a contentious red card to Benoit Cote swung the game while it was still level in the second half. On Saturday, Nice thrashed Monaco 4-0 in the Cote d'Azur derby with a goal from youngster Ignatius Gangano, capping off the victory. In the multiplex, there were 1-0 wins for Nantes over Montpellier and Amiens over Strasbourg, while Troyes held Toulouse to a goalless draw. Caen defeated Dijon 2-1 as well, despite being down to 10 men after the send-off of Adama Mbengue. On Sunday, Saint-Etienne and Angers shared a goal and a red card each, with Remy Cabella scoring on his debut, for Les Verts. While Lyon then saw off Guingamp thanks to strikes from Mariano Diaz and Nabil Fekir. And in the final match of the weekend, Rennes put 3 past Marseille at the Stade Velodrome, who managed 1 in reply, much to the chagrin of the home support. This week also sees the start of the group stages of the European competitions, with PSG heading to Scotland to face Celtic, while Monaco are in Germany to face RB Leipzig in the Champions League. Marseille will host Konyaspor in the Europa League as Nice face Belgian side Zulte Waregem, and Lyon fly off to Cyprus to take on Apollon. Start to this season. Mo, can you hear me? Seem to maybe have a technical issue with Mo, who's dropped from the call. I'll ask you the same question, Rich. What do you think to Marseille's start to this season?
It's been nothing but underwhelming, really, hasn't it? I mean, that performance Sunday night was the performance really to have sort of ignited the fans' fears that this project maybe isn't or hasn't really got the champions as the key part of their project's brief, because at times on Sunday they were appalling. It's not. I've been quite vocal with my thoughts that the defence is pretty poor, but ultimately these are seasoned professionals, and at times they were embarrassing. You've got Patrice Evra, you've got Ayman Abdennour, you've got Rami as well, and they were hopeless. I feel I enjoy a bit of a sort of Marseille implosion more than anyone, but it was quite strange to see just how bad they were, considering Rennes have hardly been lighting up the season so far. So this really was the performance, I think, that sort of has got those fears going with the Marseille fans. And once you've lost the fans, it's a tall order for someone like Garcia to turn things around.
Mo, welcome back. We'll get your opinion on it now as well. Well, what do you think to the start of this? I suppose the midpoint of the Champions project. It's 2 wins, a draw and 2 defeats now in a row. Is this there start to be a little bit of a worry? They brought in defensive reinforcements, but like Rich says, they were really poor last night.
No, yeah, absolutely. First of all, apologies for any technical difficulties on my side, but. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot to break down here. First of all, I don't think Frank McCourt is at all to blame. He might have a champions project in terms of bringing OM back to glory, but he has put up the money. Marseille have spent, I think, more than 100 million euros since January on about 8 or 9 players. Okay, it's the coach and the direction, the sporting direction, who have made decisions on where to place that money, and I think that's where the fault lies. We've spent money on aging defenders that are just not cut out of the right level. Saw last night, Nagnon, well, Ren was pretty good, who also scored a goal as well, the third goal for the visitors. But instead of fronting, I think what would have been about 15 million and above, we've spent, money on Ayman Abdennour, who last night appeared shocking on his debut. Half of the players, nearly all of the players, apart from two, are on or approaching the wrong side of 30, if they're not there already. And it's just, now having gone from one of the youngest squads in the division, are now joint first in that regard. And also, Rudy Garcia's coaching leaves a lot to be desired. He's very stubborn tactically, very inflexible during the game, changing his tactics. I don't think I've seen him alter the tactics during the game. It's always the same 4-3-3. It doesn't matter whether Marseille are playing defensively or in attack. And then sort of shields himself rather, from his early mistakes by hauling off a player in the first half, typically around the 25th minute. We saw that last season against Nantes, when OM fell quickly to a 2-0 lead, 2-0 deficit, and then sort of recovered before losing 3-2. We saw that in multiple games against Monaco. It was Alessandrini in November, and you saw that as well just before the international break. And then for some inexplicable reason, it was Hiroki Sakai last night as well. This is a player who played for Japan just a couple of days ago, but seemingly, seemed okay. But then sort of Garcia decided during the middle, and I think maybe you saw this, Rich, that, Romain Dons also questioned how weird that was on during the game last night on the touchline. And it's just, it just seems to me, is Rudy Garcia the right man for the project? Because when he first joined, we agreed that, it wasn't his team. Marseille would just have to ride the season out, try and get to where they need to get to, and then hopefully, he's able to mould his side, who he sees fit, with 100 million euros of Frank McCourt's money. And so far, that's given us numerous whopping defeats. When Marseille lose, it seems to be big. It is given us several average players. It's not Zubi Zareta that is given, going to search for players and bringing them to Marseille. It's Rudy Garcia with his French first policy. And for players that he seems to have worked with, or players that are, sort of in the twilight, not exactly the twilight, but, towards the end of their career. It just, just seems a bit weird to me in general.
A strange one, really. And Rich, I want to focus really on that transfer strategy, and Mo touched on it briefly then as well. That a lot of these players, even on deadline day, Abdennour comes in. He was decent when he was back in France earlier, but he had a terrible time at Valencia, and they've bought Mitroglou, and he can't even play for at least a couple of weeks yet. He's still injured. Can you really make heads or tails of what they're trying to do? It doesn't seem like it's building a squad that's facing Champions League footballers, because, simply put, these players aren't Champions League footballers.
To me, it seems like they're operating on a strategy of they want names. They want established players, established names to be brought in. The problem is they're having to go to their sort of fourth or fifth choices. We saw the names of the players that they were linked to in terms of filling that forward role. We started out in the summer with the likes of Giroud being rumoured, and they've ended up with, a player who has had a fairly decent time of it in Portugal, but aside from that, has hardly set the world alight. So that's the problem. And as Mo was touching on, you wonder okay, Garcia has to mould these players, has to tactically get these players in line and get them performing well. But if he's been, handed these players to manage, even the best manager in the world would struggle to have got the, defence performing, considering what personnel they've got. So someone like Zubizarreta maybe is where the finger of blame should be lying. He's the guy that's going out, presumably striking these deals, negotiating. And if this is the end result, then I've said it before, it's completely underwhelming.
Yeah, there seems to be some kind of disconnect somewhere, whether it is from Rudy Garcia wanting this French first policy and these more experienced players, or whether it's Zubizarreta chasing them or not. If it is Rudy Garcia mentioning them, why isn't Zubizarreta fighting against that? Why isn't, if it's the other way around, why is the other one not suggesting it? It seems odd, doesn't it?
There seems to be some sort of, I think, rumor going around, where Zubizarreta is not exactly happy with the club's policy, or there is some sort of disconnect in his work with Rudy Garcia. And I think there might have been one or two rumors where he was sort of considering maybe an exit. But for me, it is Rudy Garcia's policy. At the end of the day, he's the coach. He signs off on the players. He chose the players, and he does. And the weird thing is that he doesn't even use them. So we have last night where we relied on 36-year-old Patrice Evra, who was completely out of his depth, when Jordan Amavi would have been a better solution who was on the bench. You had Hiroki Sakai, who he only found out about 9:30 last night that he actually might have been 50% fit. Okay, you've got Bruno Sarr's not exactly right back, but you've also got the promising Boubacar Kamara, who Marseille fought tooth and nail to keep over the past year. He wasn't even in the match day 18, and hasn't been really under Rudy Garcia. You've got the versatile attacking option, Remy Cabella. He's been farmed out because Garcia thinks that he is actually below Ocampos in the pecking order. You've got Gregory Sertic, who has been appalling in the last 3 games, but still sees a start. And also, you've got Maxime Lopez, who I think has been pretty poor for the last couple of games. But, it doesn't matter, come hell or high water, he will always start a game because that's the formation that Garcia will always pick, much to the, chagrin of Zambo Anguissa, who could actually be sort of a powerful midfielding reinforcement, playing maybe a 4-2-3-1, bringing maybe the best out of Payet in a number 10 role. But that's something that Garcia will not consider. It's been 4-3-3 always, and I just think for right now, Marseille are just very, very easy to find out. If you're Rennes with Monaco to that regard, with a powerful forward line with young pacey players, all you need to do is just run and draw players out of position. If you're a team in sort of the mold of Angers, it's just about piling pressure on sort of a weak midfield, and then just sort of really taking the game to Marseille. I think that just tactically there are better coaches who are able to set a plan B and plan C, and I think just that against Marseille they're just very, very easy to find out at the moment.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, I'm thinking Zambo Anguissa had a really good Confederations Cup, and whether that's a big milestone, really, it's a bit of a difficult one to judge, but he maybe deserves a better chance than he has been given. When Jordi Amavi does play, he plays essentially left wing against Monaco, which seemed a strange decision as it does now, as it did then. And I agree with you on Ocampos. I really want to know who his agent is, because he's been getting him moves to AC Milan, he got to Genoa. Well, is it Genoa briefly, and then went to AC Milan and did okay there, and has managed to stay at Marseille. Whoever's convincing these managers he's a good player, unless he's the greatest trainer we've ever seen, and it never shows up otherwise. I do want to know the secret behind his juju. So, really, to cap off Marseille talk, at least anyway, Mo, do you think Garcia is the right man for the job? And if not, what's the kind of manager you would need to bring in?
Like I said at the beginning, I don't think he is anymore. This time last year there was absolutely no chance. He's been there 11 months now. There was no chance we could really judge him when Marseille lost heavily to Monaco in November and in January, because those weren't his players. And even past January, just signing Payet and a couple of other squad fillers, you could not really say that it was his team. but he has adopted his French first policy. He has, you know, chosen his players, and right now, just Marseille might have been 18 to 20 games unbeaten just before the Monaco game, but it's not really they haven't really kicked on. They haven't really kicked on at all. He's getting found out by teams that are better than Marseille. He's getting found out by teams that are not as good as Marseille. I wouldn't, say, sack him yet, sack him immediately. But I think the patience is wearing thin because McCourt's project, obviously, what I appreciate about McCourt is that he's been up front. He has made money available. He's made, his intentions clear. I think what Rudy and Zubizarreta have done instead is that they've operated a short-term policy. We're going to use this money to get Marseille back to the Champions League. On paper, this squad should be at least getting third. And for third, depending on who the winner of the Europa League is, should qualify for the Champions League group stage next season. And then from then on, we'll use the money plus, I guess, a little bit of McCourt's money to consolidate the squad. But if OM don't get to where, don't meet their season objectives, and that's a big, big setback. And at this moment, I don't think Garcia is the man. Who's available to replace him? Currently, I don't think there's a couple of managers, good managers on the market apart from Thomas Tuchel and Luis Enrique. But I think they're quite, a little bit far-fetched at the moment. So I think it's just something we'll have to monitor over the next coming months. But if, Garcia does go on like this, I don't see him staying past Christmas.
Strong words, and it's difficult to disagree with how he's managed the last couple of games at least. Let's move on to Rennes, who was also involved in that match, Rich, and finally the cloud lifts briefly away from those for a moment. Do you think they finally found the right mix of the front two with Khazri joining Sarr up front rather than and Mbele sort of moved out wide? Do you think that worked a little bit better, especially for Sarr?
I think we certainly saw a much improved Sarr against Marseille. It's difficult to judge how well that attack was doing because I think they were aided so much by such a poor Marseille defence. So it's difficult to say, but I was one of those that doubted the reasoning behind bringing Khazri in. I've been 90 minutes later, I've been proved wrong, so long may that continue. But no, I really like the way that they set up. I think very quickly, very early 2 goals, it became apparent that, this was a Marseille side there for the taking. I think then the formation was, they started out as pretty much a 4-4-2 still. But I think with that fantastic start and sensing, how poor Marseille were defensively, that almost moved and flowed into becoming almost a more 4-3-3 formation. What I like to see was that those front three of Khazri, Sarr and Mbele seemed to be quite flexible. They seemed to recognise and understand where each of them, the other two were and position themselves accordingly. It didn't seem like any of the three had a particularly fixed position. We saw Mbele drift wide right on occasions, but Bourigeaud was there as well. And Mbele then moved a bit more central, and that's what I like to see. I like to see players who are reactive to the situation on the pitch. How much of that influence was from Gorku from the sidelines, I don't know. But, it was a real positive performance. Some real standout goals, some real standout players from Rennes. I thought Thomas Kubek had an excellent debut, made a couple of really important saves. We had Jazino Namzi, a academy player, signed his first pro contract earlier in the season. I was a bit wary about bringing him in for his debut at the Velodrome, but even with a side with Thauvin, Germain and Payet in, he wasn't troubled. He wasn't troubled in the slightest. So, strong debut from him. Didn't really put a foot wrong. Playing alongside Nyanyon, why not stick with him? Nyanyon last season was brought in as cover because we had we had injury problems at the back. And look how well Nyanyon's developed. Why not do the same then with Niamzi? So as ever, being a Rennes fan, I can't get too optimistic because, chances are next game we won't see this performance again. But, from what you've seen within those 90 minutes, as bad as Marseille were, Rennes still had to beat them. It's an obvious saying, I know, but really, really impressed with how they went out. They were positive from the off. Players looked up for it. They looked really dangerous on the break, really quick. So I can only hope that something has clicked with those players and something has clicked with Gourcuff, and we can see more of this going forward.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder what they were feeding Khazri at Sunderland for him to be pretty poor in the Premier League and all of a sudden come to life instantly in the Premier League. And I really liked his performance, especially I think it helped Sarr because he was allowed a little bit more freedom to go around him and play in little wider areas where I think he's much, much better. I mean, for the first goal, he sells Ayman Abdenor like he's a bomb. It's just like a post there that he just runs past. It was so easy, and it was a lovely little finish as well from Khazri. But Mo, there was a lot of pressure on Gourcuff heading into this one, and there was rumours that he needed 6 points out of the next 9. That's 3 on the board at least. Does that lift some of the gloom for him?
Yeah, of course. And I think, he's becoming some sort of wizard when it comes to visiting Marseille because, this is not the second time we've been thumped at home by Rennes in the last 18 months. And I think, like Rich was saying, the way that they were set up, it was quite impressive. The flexibility and versatility of the front three, especially position-wise, was quite good. And if you look at from the opposite side, Payet, Thauvin and Germain, they were quite rigid. I mean, Germain, I don't think I saw him in the first 45 at all whatsoever. And yeah, he's set up his team well. He played big and the result came accordingly. I think the concern is that whether Rennes can obviously replicate that going on into the next 2 weeks. But I think this was obviously a big morale booster, and it should see them go up the table.
Let's hope so. We'll move on now to what was somewhat of a surprising result, at least from current form this weekend, in that Cote d'Azur derby as Nice really romped to that 4-0 win over Monaco. Rich, it was the same result last season at the Allianz Riviera, excuse me. Are Lucien Favre's men the Monegasque's kryptonite at this moment in time?
Yeah, it was quite uncanny, really. I don't know what went on in this game. I really don't. I just scratch my head thinking, Monaco have been impressive now for such a long period of time that a result like this comes as a genuine shock, especially after such a poor start from Nice this season. So I don't know. It wasn't particularly that Monaco were dreadful. I don't think it was particularly that Nice were outstanding. It was just, Nice took their chances. Monaco didn't. You can only hope that, Monaco, this doesn't become, I don't know, with them having, being in the public glare, I think, so much this early part of the season, mainly through the transfer market. I can only hope that this doesn't affect any focus that the side had got. That this is not a beginning of the likes of Fabinho, the likes of Lamar, although he went off at half time, taking they didn't get their moves that they wanted in the summer. Other players did, so why should I bother? So that's what I'm hoping it doesn't become, because we need Monaco to be playing well. We need Monaco to be winning games if we've got any chance of a competitive race for the championship. Needed a result like this after such a poor start to the season. I genuinely didn't see it coming.
Apologies for that if I've dropped from the call then. It was a bit skew-iff on my end, at least, anyway. Mo, like Rich mentioned, it was a bit of an unusual result, really, and not one we saw coming. And it must have felt like Groundhog Day for Jardim at points. There were moments where Monaco, they had a high line again, 2 goals from Balotelli again. It was a very strange one. Did you really see this one coming?
No, absolutely. Like Rich said, it quite seems like a bought out. And I'm hoping that we can put this down to some sort of lethargy, before the Champions League week, where players, normally have one eye on another clash in the next couple of days. But it just didn't seem like Monaco. I think one of the goals that stood out for me in particular was Balotelli's second goal, if I'm correct, where the defense was just absolutely static. This is the Monaco defense who've matched, the best in Europe over the last 12 months. It's a Monaco defense that, with the exception of Mendy, hasn't changed too much over the summer. And they were just completely gone to let Balotelli score Nice's third. It's just, seems to me, I do agree with Rich in that maybe some of the players who, have seen, post-transfer window are taking their foot off the gas a little bit, are, not giving their maximum. Perhaps, maybe it could just be one of those things. Maybe it could just be a freak result. As we saw 12 months ago, a 4-0 defeat to Nice isn't exactly fatal to their title chances. And obviously Favre against Jardim, obviously I think he has a tactical upper hand. Nice were absolutely fantastic. They were good value for their victory. They were well set up. And Balotelli, say what you want about him, but he does come up in the big games. He has, come up, well, most of the big games rather. He did well against Monaco last year, did well against Marseille last year, and he has now replicated it again. So it's good to see him and Player, getting in, getting amongst the goals. I just hope for Monaco that it's just, a one-off blip like last season. All good runs have to come to an end. Some, obviously abruptly, but it's not something that will derail them, because like Rich said, I think we do need Monaco to get back on track really, really quickly against this sort of behemoth that PSG have become. And I just hope that for all, intents and purposes, it doesn't become the Ligue 1 of 2015-16. So yeah, good luck to them going forward, I guess.
At least that's a good omen that they won the league last season despite that 4-0 defeat last year. But Dribble Sidibe, I was watching the highlights earlier and I can't believe how rubbish he was in this game at times. It's probably not the first time we've mentioned this, but we said that really he was one of the players that they were probably looking to shift out and play Almami Torres more regularly. But clearly teams have watched enough of Sidibe to see how rubbish of a defender he is. He was so far up the field on some of them. And you mentioned it, Mo, the goal for Balotelli's walked behind him. He's not even had to sprint. He's not had to play a clever run. Sidibe's just not turned around and not looked at him. Glick turns around as soon as the goal goes in and looks at Sidibe as if he's shot his sister. He couldn't believe it. Yeah. It was so poor defending. And there was numerous times. I mean, I really like Jemison as well and Glick as a partnership, but at times they were fumbling when they were trying to be the two-man. Like Jameson would cross over him and run to the player, and player scored past him because he easily darted inside. It was just disappointing, really. But let's briefly touch on Nice, Rich. And is this a possibility that they can grow from it? I mean, this kind of result just shows you how good of a manager Favre is, for one thing at least. But this is something for them now to build on, isn't it?
Absolutely. They now need to, despite me prattling on about such a poor start to the season, they now need to forget that start to the season. This is their start. They've come back from the international break, transfer windows closed. They've come up with their big game, local rivals, and they put them to the sword. So they now have to. That has to be. If that doesn't give them the impetus now to push on and get the season back on track, nothing will. They've got Rennes away at the weekend. There's another perfect example. Rennes will go into that game feeling very optimistic after their win at the weekend. Nice will be going in. That'll be a bit of an acid test to see whether this result will be what kicks them into gear. I'm hoping it will be. We all enjoyed Nice when they were playing well last season, last couple of seasons, in fact, but specifically last season. It's great to see Alassane Player back, seen back to his best. He was really, really good, I thought. He was creating, scoring. So to see him back, great. Always great to see Nampalys Mendy back, although only a brief outing for him. And I suppose conversely to what we were talking about with the Monaco players, and perhaps, is there a bit of a concern about how they will take not moving on? You then had Seri. It wasn't his best game for Nice by a long shot, but he was obviously very vocal in the fact he never got his move away from the club in the transfer window. So it would have been even easier for him to have given up the ghost, packing. Why should I put in the effort? I told the club I wanted to go. They didn't let me go. Why should I bother? But he didn't. He knuckled down, got on with the job. He's retained the captaincy. And it's great to see. As I say, it wasn't his best game, but I think it would have been very easy for him to have put in a bad game, especially as it would have been so obviously highlighted against a team like Monaco. So, in all, I think for Nice, yes, this is going to be a launch pad for their season, and hopefully, perhaps not next weekend, but in the games to come, that we'll see further proof of that.
Yeah, and credit to Ignatius Ganago, who sprinted at Favre as well when he scored his first goal. The 19-year-old classic French player without the name on his back. It's great to see a young player again coming through at Nice. Time for Mo to leave us now. Thank you for joining us again, Mo.
Thank you.
Yeah, follow him at Mohammed Ali _93 for all your Marseille news. He's always a great follow. Thank you again for Mo for joining us. But now it's time to look ahead to Monaco's Champions League game now, and that's the clash with RB Leipzig. And for that, we welcome German football news' Matthew Marshall. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks, guys.
So Ralph mix up my word. So Ralph Hasenhüttl's men finished second last season and started off reasonably well this season, at least. What kind of form are they heading into this one in?
Well, they started the league campaign pretty ordinarily, mate. They lost 2-0 at Schalke, and nothing really happened for them on the opening day of the Bundesliga. But they went into the second game at home against Freiburg, heavy favourites, and actually found themselves 1-0 down at half-time. Now, I don't know what Ralph Hasenhüttl said to his men at half-time, but whatever he said certainly worked. They came out and really dominated Freiburg in the second half, put 4 unanswered goals past them. And on the weekend, they travelled to Hamburg, who themselves had won their opening 2 games, but really, outclassed Hamburg, scored 2 goals in the second half, a screamer to Naby Keita, and a lovely goal to Timo Werner on the counter-attack. So they certainly come into this clash with Monaco full of confidence, and Monaco will have to be careful, especially after what happened to them there at Nice.
Yeah, and they got a lot of press last season for a very successful first season in the top flight, despite some of the bad press about all the money things and the ownerships from Red Bull. But what kind of style do they play? I know a few of our fans and English fans in general wouldn't have seen them play, but with Naby Keita in the midfield and all these expansive players, how do they sort of set up?
Well, they basically play a 4-4-2. Forsberg has been the man on the left side, Sabitzer out on the right. And the main thing that distinguishes them is Naby Keita. He's a central midfielder, but he's just so dynamic and quick, and he's just got all the skills. He can run around and mop up opposition attacks. His dribbling is just sensational. His passing and the way he sets up goals, and the goals that you've seen him score. He's just got all the tools, and certainly when he's in the side, he just gives them that little bit extra. He's got a bit of an injury concern coming into this game, so we'll have to see what happens with them. But I guess the way you would describe Leipzig is just a hard-working, intelligent side. They really like to dominate the ball. They've had just under 70% possession in their last 2 games. But not only are they, comfortable dominating possession, they're very quick on the counter-attack, and they like to play a high line and press the opposition in their own half and start quick attacks in that fashion. So the way I would describe Leipzig quickly would just be to say hardworking, intelligent side, but they just got all the weapons to really hurt the opposition.
Yeah, and you've mentioned a couple of key players there. Emil Forsberg, one of the leading assist makers. He's a really intelligent player from set pieces and from open play. And obviously Naby Keita will be heading to Liverpool next season. But one key player I wanted to look at who's in fantastic form at the moment for club and country is Timo Werner, who struggled at times at Stuttgart. He wasn't quite the right player, sometimes playing out wide, didn't play as a central striker. Now, as that main man at Leipzig, he's on fire.
It's unbelievable. I watched him quite a bit at Stuttgart, and I didn't really give him a second look, But credit to Leipzig, they paid 10 million for him from Stuttgart, to play with them in their debut Bundesliga campaign last season, and he's just come out of nowhere. Scored 21 goals last season in the league. And as you mentioned, he started this season on fire. He scored 2 goals in that win against Freiburg, another goal on the weekend, 3 goals in 2 games for Germany to really establish himself as the #1 striker for Germany as they head to the World Cup next year. And at such a young age, it's realistic that we could see Timo Werner playing for the German national side for the next decade. And if he continues to progress as he has in the last year and a bit, I mean, it's scary how good he can be. He's so quick. His movement is just so intelligent. He drifts out wide. He links up very well with his teammates. And if you've seen his goal on the weekend at Hamburg, that counter-attack goal, but he had to brush off 2 defenders, which he did with strength and pace. And then when he gets into the keeper with the one-on-one situation, he's just got the calmness and the poise to slot past the keeper there. So he's just got all the tools. He's got all the tricks, very composed. And it's really scary how good he might be in a few years.
Yeah, sometimes what happens, I mean, he was 17 when he started at Stuttgart, and sometimes it just takes a couple of years, even for a young player. You forget he's still 21. That's absolutely crazy to really put your head around. Is there any weaknesses in this side? I know sometimes goalkeeper's not always been stable. Willy Orban's a solid defender, but they're struggling for a partner next to him. Is there worries there that Monaco maybe can exploit in this one?
Honestly, it's difficult to see any obvious weaknesses in this side. They're just so intelligent and they work so well together. I'd have to say maybe the young French defender, Upamecano, but it's hard to really single him out in that first game at Schalke. They looked ordinary as a team. And to be fair to him, he's had a couple of really good games since then. Just a beast in the air and really solid. But I just noticed in that first game at Schalke, his positioning was maybe a little bit suspect. So that might be something Monaco can take advantage of. But it's really, stretching it to say that he's an obvious weak link. But I just think with his age and his lack of experience, coming up against Monaco and some of the guile they've got up front there with Falcao, maybe he would be one that they would look to target. But they're really solid all over the park, as I've mentioned already, just so intelligent and work so well as a team. There's really nothing you could say that's just an obvious weakness.
Rich, I'll bring you on this because there's a player that we know very well, at least, that's joined Leipzig this summer, and that's former Paris Saint-Germain man, Jean-Kevin Augustin, who's obviously, it would be nice to see him play again. He's had a decent start to the season. He scored a couple of goals. He had a bit of an issue with the under-21s where he was sent home as well, with arguing with Sylvain Ripoll as well, which is maybe not good for his future career, but he brings an extra dynamism to them, doesn't he? He's an interesting player, saying that he was really a backup last season for Paris Saint-Germain. This is a chance for him to kickstart a career in a really more exciting young team.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I'll know exactly how well he's done in Germany, but it was a move that I was very much for. It was certainly a move that I think was long overdue. I think a combination of club and the player. Perhaps I know the club have. PSG tried, I think, to loan him out a couple of times, and he seemed quite unwilling. By all reports, he seemed anyway determined to make a go of it at PSG, despite all the obvious signs that they weren't really going to give him that opportunity. So, we've seen what he can do in fits and starts at times with PSG, especially There's been a couple of pre-season tours where he's really shone. And we've seen what he can do at youth level as well. He was top scorer in that successful under 19s team alongside Mbappe. So no, it's a really positive move. He's gone to a young side who seem, to be really going places. So I'm really hoping that it's the successful move that he really needs.
Matt, I just want to get your quick thoughts on his start to the season as well, because obviously there's a French interest in Augustin and Upamecano as well. How has Augustin settled into this Leipzig side, who, like you've mentioned, have got a number of array of attacking talent that he's maybe squeezing in front of, at least for the time being?
Yeah, he's really battling with the Danish striker Yusuf Poulsen to play alongside Werner. But I thought Augustin was sensational, honestly, in his first home game against Freiburg. Got a couple of assists, really working well with Werner, and he hit the post early on on the weekend against Hamburg, and had a pretty solid game. But look, I think that if there's one thing that we've learned with Leipzig is that they improve players rapidly and very, very well. They're no fools with Ralf Rangnick. They're calling the shots. So it just wouldn't surprise me if Augustin stays in the team here alongside Werner and improves no end. Once they work out where each other are going to be, he'll be able to make the runs that opens up space for Werner and vice versa. I'm not sure if he'll start this game against Monaco, but I think it's a very good move for Augustin to move to Leipzig, as it is for so many other talented youngsters. And I really only see him improving as the season goes on.
Yeah, and he never really worked out at PSG, even though when he was given the chance ahead of Cavani, he doesn't quite fit their work. But nice to see him doing better in Germany. Rich, the thing I'm looking forward to, I know Matt's mentioned Cote might be out, but it'd be great if he does start, because what a titanic midfield battle that will be between him and Fabinho. If it does happen, that'll be one to watch, certainly.
Absolutely. You just have to hope that Fabinho can brush off a very ordinary performance from the weekend, but certainly that would be great to see. I'm really hoping that Tielemans finally gets a starting role. I think Moutinho has been fantastic, but maybe Monaco, certainly I think in that Nice game, but maybe this season they're missing that spark of creativity. A bit more centrally, maybe. Bernardo Silva, although played wide right, often drifted inside, and Ronnie Lopez has been pretty good, but he's certainly been nowhere near a Bernardo Silva replacement. I'm not saying Tielemans is either, but we saw countless times last season just what he can do driving forward from midfield. So it would be great to see him and Fabinho together in that midfield battle against the likes of Cote.
And it'll be that's what I'm really looking forward to. That's mouthwatering. It might seem strange to people who always say striker versus striker, but a midfield battle of that titanic clash will be really great to see. Very quickly, Matt, what would your prediction be in this one?
Well, honestly, I didn't see the Monaco game, but I saw the highlights, and the way they got picked off on the counter on those first two goals was quite alarming, because that's one of Leipzig's pet plays. And that last goal to Ganago, I know the game was over, but still, the ball over the top is just mincemeat for Timo Werner. So the goals that I saw Monaco concede, certainly worrying, because they seem to be the goals that Leipzig feed off. So, but still, it's very hard to pick a winner in this game. Leipzig playing their first game ever in the Champions League. But one thing you need to remember about Leipzig is that they're just so full of confidence and so sure of themselves. From the top down, they've come in under so much criticism since they were established a few years ago as a club. They cop it all over the place, everywhere they go in Germany, but they don't let it get to them. They don't seem to worry about what the other team does. They go in there and they play their own game. So, look, it's very hard to predict anything, but I think we'll see some goals. I think both teams will come out and attack. And whatever happens, I'm sure we're in for a fantastic game one way or another.
Yeah. Rich, very quickly, what do you think might be the outcome?
Me personally, I see a high-scoring draw here. I think this is obviously a new Monaco side. This is a new frontier for Leipzig. So I think you could be looking at something like a 2-2 draw maybe.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. And I hope Keita Balde gets a look in as well. That'd be nice and interesting to see him start his first game and be in a Champions League game. And I'm sure the atmosphere in Leipzig will be pretty terrific for their first Champions League game. Thank you, Matt, for joining us this evening. It's a pleasure having you on.
Thanks very much. Enjoyed it. Enjoyed the game.
Yeah, and we will. And if you want to follow him on Twitter, it's at NoobsCorp, and he's always an excellent little read for Get German Football News as well. Let's move on now, Rich, to our final topic, and that's Paris Saint-Germain. And we've squished them at the bottom this week. We're usually one of our first news stories, and especially with them continuing their 100% record with a 5-1 win in Metz. But it's not quite as simple as that, is it, Rich?
It's not. No. Yet again, and we've seen it a couple of times this season, they were quite slow out of the blocks. What should be for a striker of his calibre anyway, a very simple chance. As he seemingly does now every game, there is a sitter that he misses. Made amends just after the half-hour mark. I think to everybody's surprise, Emmanuel Riviere then got on the score sheet. And then, we then had that red card. Asuakasu sent off. And I'm very much in the camp of it's barely even a foul as far as I'm concerned, let alone a card of any colour. I don't think it was particularly from behind. It was very much, I think, from the side. He very obviously got the ball. Replays, for me anyway, seem to show that he never even actually got any of Mbappe. Certainly not to the extent that we saw, the sort of roles that followed from Mbappe. So it was from my regard anyway, it was a dreadful decision, absolutely dreadful decision. I think the sort of look of astonishment on Asuakasu as he just sort of very calmly, I thought, actually, considering how bad the decision was, walked off the pitch, just showed that it was a bit of disbelief, I think. It was crazy decision, and of course then it changed the entire game.
Yeah, I hate saying things like this because you really shouldn't about referees, but it killed this game, didn't it? I mean, I was watching it and having my dinner at the same time, and I sort of give up after the red card came in, and as soon as the second goal went in, you knew exactly where this one was heading because Metz were competitive for a long time. They held out relatively decently. They were maybe lucky on a couple of occasions that there was an early chance for Cavani, although he's offside, that the defence looked poor at times. In that moment, they maybe got a little bit lucky, but a goal, that really nice header from Riviere, gave them a little bit of hope and a little bit of a chance. And I still can't believe he's missed that chance in the second.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That's the other thing that compels it really. As a dire night for Metz is that had that gone in, had they got the fair rub of the green in terms of the red card decision, who knows what could have happened in that game. You would still bet very, very strongly that PSG would have gone on and won, but certainly 5-1 is not a scoreline that reflected either PSG playing really well or Metz playing really badly.
No, I think Riviere had to balance out the fact that he'd scored earlier with a shocking miss, because not scoring for 2 years, it leaves you a little bit rusty at least anyway. Let's be a little bit positive at least, and let's talk about Mbappe's debut. Obviously, it's his first game for PSG. He did play wide right this time. Many had speculated that he was replacing Cavani before the game. Instead, they went for a 4-2-3-1 with Draxler in the middle and Neymar and Mbappe in the wide positions with Cavani as a central player. What did you think to the lone man's first game for the Parisians?
All in all, I don't think you can particularly knock it. Although I will keep it positive, but I will just touch on the fact that those roles were completely needless. With the Asuakasu incident, but he got his goal. He looked lively. I think there were signs that he's definitely got to find his feet in the side. There was definite glimpses that this is a very raw 18-year-old. There were times where he looked a little bit naive still. He's no longer, perhaps anyway, the sort of big star of the team. He's now come in and he's a big star in a team of huge stars. So I think there's definitely going to be some settling in, but of course that's to be expected. But got his goal, took it very well. He looked lively. He still wanted to come out wide to the left. That's going to have to be a problem. I think that Emery needs to work out. It's all well and good telling Mbappe that he's going to play on the right, but as we saw in the France game, he wants to move left. He really, really does. So that's a problem for Emery to sort. Fortunately, I'm not paid to sort that kind of problem. But all in all, it's a perfectly acceptable debut. But there'll be plenty more to see from him.
Yeah, and my worry is slightly, as you've mentioned, him wanting to pull that left, is I thought Neymar was a little bit quieter in this one than we've seen in the last couple of games, at least. He didn't quite have the influence he'd had in the past. He had brief moments, and same with Mbappe. I mean, there was one moment where he pulls a cross out with the outside of his boot to Cavani, and it's an absolute stunner of a ball. And there's just little moments like that remind you that this kid is 18 and something very, very special. But I do slightly worry that maybe both might overshadow each other at times this season, and that might be them finding their feet in this formation that maybe Cavani gets pushed out of maybe at the end of the season if he continues missing.
Well, Mbappe, didn't he, when he joined, said that he very much saw himself as actually a more central player. So maybe that's the plan. Maybe it's just have a season of you're a PSG player, albeit on loan, with a view then that, perhaps next summer, Cavani will be getting on. He'll have served his purpose at the club. Mbappe's our new centre forward.
It will be an interesting one, and it does give them options as well. If Cavani needs a rest, or if anything like that comes up, an injury, they can move Mbappe inside. They've got options on the bench, but we'll chat about them moving now to in the Champions League at least, and they'll be heading to Celtic Park to take on obviously Celtic on this midweek. They've had a good start to the season. They had to come through to 3 Champions League qualifiers to get to this stage, Celtic, and they've won every single game in the SBL bar one so far. They're a really interesting side underneath Brendan Rodgers, with a couple of French stars, especially one in Moussa Dembele, who's attracted a number of interest as much he did at Fulham as well. What do you think the Scottish side might pose as a kind of threat to PSG in this one, or is it maybe one of those games where it might be a little bit of a walkover?
You know what? I don't think this is going to be a walkover. This is a slightly new look PSG side. It's their first steps back into European football after such a horrifying way of exiting the competition last season. There's going to be a little bit of trepidation. It's not an easy place to go. It really isn't. Celtic as a team perhaps may not represent as big a challenge on the European scene as they have done in previous years. But we were talking about it actually just off air, weren't we, Nathan? It's that atmosphere, isn't it? That some of those PSG players are not going to have perhaps experienced that, certainly recently. It won't be an atmosphere that they will come across domestically. So if Celtic Park can be that intimidating atmosphere that everyone knows it can be, maybe that just knocks a little bit more confidence off a team that's perhaps not going in at 100%, bearing in mind what happened last time they were in Europe.
No, and they don't play Bruno Mars in Glasgow, at least, so they might have to get used to fans singing for a change instead. But yeah, I agree with you. It's never the easiest chance to go to Celtic. They always put up a fight with those fans, and you have a feeling with that defence. I mean, if Emmanuel Riviere can score past them, surely Moussa Dembele has a chance. He's a fantastic forward. He's really going to go on and do something he's definitely going to be playing Champions League football next season, whether Celtic are there or not. But he's a terrific forward that a lot of teams are keeping their eye on. And with his pace in behind, expecting Thiago Silva to be back as well, even though Kimpembe and Marquinhos haven't had the best starts to the season either. They've both been a bit iffy, especially in that Mets game. They don't look the greatest at the back at left back. Yuri seems decent, but he's definitely more attacking orientated than Kurzawa, which seems strange to say because Kurzawa is very attack orientated as well. But it's an interesting one, and also taking into the fact that PSG played a 4-2-3-1 at the weekend. I probably guess they'll play a 4-3-3 in this one. A, to be a little bit more safe, and B, to bring Verratti back into things. But it's never. I'm sure Barcelona and clubs like that will tell you it's never easy at Glasgow. It might be a bit easier when they have to travel to Parc des Princes. It might be a bit of a higher occasion for them where they tend to struggle away from home in Europe. But it's a tough ask. It's always a tough ask. And good luck to them come their game on Tuesday. Let's move on to our Ligue 1 snapshots now. Rich, what do you have for this week?
For me, it's unexpectedly positive starts to the season. I think both Caen and Angers, Angers especially, unbeaten so far, albeit only one win. But, impressive performances in draws against the likes of Bordeaux, at the Velodrome against this new look Lille, most recently at the weekend away at Saint-Etienne, who obviously had such a great start to the season. They're still got that sort of fighting quality, perhaps a little bit too much of a fighting quality, as we saw with Crivelli's red card at the weekend, but they've still got that fighting mentality, gritty performances. But adding just that little bit more, it's not exactly brilliantly attractive football, but they're just adding a little extra dimension to their game, which is meaning that they're still hard to break down, but they're now posing a little bit of a threat going forward. So they've basically made a hugely impressive start to the season. They still may prove me wrong, but I have said that I do think that they could be strong relegation candidates, and of course it's only match day 5 that we've just had, so still a long way to go. But they bounced back from 2 losses in their opening 2 games. A strong 3 points at Lille, and then beating 2 sides who I would have thought they'd be fighting it out come the end of the season and towards the foot of the table in Metz and Dijon. They've got a test away at Nantes coming up. But I think there's 2 sides there who are performing beyond, I think, what was expected by many of them at the start of the season.
Yeah, and especially at Caen, having players like Santini and Ronnie Rodeland just give them a little bit of an extra edge compared to some of those other sides fighting relegation. I've got 3 little snapshots, and one interesting one goalkeeper save, because I love one of those, and a nice little funny moment as well. The first one is Remy Cabella. So it's in that Angers game as well, and it was great to see him in his debut for Saint-Etienne be a little bit more inventive than we've seen at Marseille, and we saw glimpses at Newcastle, but not much. But he looked like he might be slowly turning back into that Montpellier version of Cabella, who was terrific. And there was moments in this one where he just decided that he was going to do something, and it seems like it's such a long time since he's done that. And he was inventive. He scored a really nice, lovely goal. He had 3 players around him. He played a lovely 1-2 with Johnny that didn't quite come off, but he didn't stop. He carried on that run and got exactly into the right space to play a ball in, and a lovely little finish. And he had a couple of little moments in that game where you thought, yeah, he's got something between the bit of his teeth. It's reinvigorated him a lot more than it seemed to with that move to Marseille, and hopefully that can be the start of something really great again for us French football fans. The other 2 are my classic goalkeeper save of the week. Stéphane Ruffier's save from Fulgini from point-blank range is an absolute wonderful save. It's one of the best reaction saves you'll see this season. He's right in front of him and he tips it onto the bar. It's an absolute stunning save. Credit to him, although he lets run that penalty underneath his body. So Ruffier doing classic Ruffier, being unbelievable and then slightly embarrassing in the same moment. And one final one, famous French referee, Clément Turpin, had a little bit of a tussle in the game between Monaco and Nice where he was caught between two players and he received a nice little knee to the head from Marlon, the on-loan Barcelona defender. He shook it off relatively nicely, but I don't think I'd like to be kneed in the head by a big defender like that. But credit to the Frenchman for seeing the funny side of it. Time for some viewer questions just to finish off this week, and we've got a couple here. Let's start with Thomas or at WYS Man. Rich, can Metz realistically survive with the attacking power of Riviere and Roux? I mean, they showed glimpses maybe in this one, but it's a tough ask, isn't it?
It's not a strike force that will be making many Ligue 1 defences quake, I don't think. They're not going to, no, they won't survive on the sort of, I don't know, dozen goals that those two will get between them, if I'm being optimistic. They needed to recruit better in the transfer window. They needed creativity. They needed a better option up front. I mean, they should have signed Sheikh Diabate. There's no question about it. They should have signed him. So no, they're not a strike force that would make me doubt my opinion that they are big favourites for the drop.
No, I think a dozen goals would be absolutely terrific. I think they'd be doing moonsaults in Metz if they had those marked goals from those two. Yeah, I agree with you. It's nowhere near good enough. Their only hope now for me is that January window that they used so wisely last season pays them dividends again, because they need a goal scorer really that can get them those 10 goals, 12 goals that someone like Santini at Con will do to keep them up. Final question is from Connor Ketley. Who should Marseille have realistically bought in at centre-half instead of Abdenor?
They played against him on Sunday night. They should have bought Yoris Gnagnon. If this philosophy of trying to get these young French players in, okay, I know Gnagnon's declared that he'll be playing for the Ivory Coast, but he would have fit that bill. He would have fit that bill perfectly. He had a real standout season. He's only getting better. He will eventually, chances are it's going to be the end of this season, we'll move on to a big club. And as Mo said earlier in the show, probably Ren would have, 15, 20 million, perhaps Ren probably would have sold him. And Marseille, through all their troubles, still obviously carry such a big, the amount of history they've got behind them and the name that they have and the support that they still have, they still carry such a strong, powerful presence that, it's still going to be hard for young players to turn down a move to a club like Marseille. So that in a nutshell, that's who they should have signed.
Yeah, and we mentioned it a lot during the start of the season, really. Him and Issa Diop's the other name you'd throw in the hat is the two that are glaring, especially in French football. Maybe Christophe Julien as well, you might add into the mix there. They're three centre-backs that you can get that are all under the age of 25, all going to cost you maybe maximum 20 million euros. They were offers of Diop for about 16 million in the summer, and I think you probably could get Julien for 15, maybe even less than that if you're lucky. You should have been looking at that. They fit the profile of what supposedly Rudy Garcia wants of French players. They're young. They're good now. How good could they be in the future? You can make that happen if you do that. And if you reach Champions League football, then it's a great growth, great breeding ground for those kind of players to really move on and move to the next level. But they've missed the boat, I think, on those two. I don't think if Gnagnon probably will leave in the summer. I think he'll go somewhere bigger, unless Marseille do make the Champions League. And the same with Diop, he might be looking at Leipzig again or something like that. They've probably missed the boat, unfortunately, which is their own fault more than anyone else's. That's all that we have time for this week. My thanks to Rich, Mo, Matt, and everyone listening at home. Join us for the preview show on Thursday, and the main show will be back at the same time, same place next week. A bientôt, and goodbye.